לי מלא בושה, ואיך אבוא ואין לי מה, רק לי מה אפני בחיי, קל וחומר כשאמות, ראה אותי אבי ואלוקיי חסר זהות, ואתה יצרת בי את כל היותי, ונתת באפר גם חלק אלוקי, בכל זמן שנשמה פועמת בי רוצה אני לקיים ולא לחדור, בכל זמן שאתה רואה אותי תחזיק אותי חזק שלא אבוא, ריבון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות, את שכתה מלפניך תישא, כי לא אצדק וקטנה מילה, הסליחה לך דומיית תהילה, מאמר על מסע, ומכל תלאות הדרך הקשה קשרו רגליי, ואתה תרים אותי מכל שפלות ליבי, וכמו אב רחום עכשיו תטהר אותי, בכל זמן שנשמה פועמת בי רוצה אני לקיים ולא לחדור, בכל זמן שאתה רואה אותי מחזיק אותי חזק שלא אפול, ריבון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות, בכל זמן שנשמה פועמת בי רוצה אני לקיים ולא לחדור, בכל זמן שאתה רואה אותי תחזיק אותי חזק שלא אפול, שנשמה פועמת בי לקיים ולא לחדור, רואה אותי תחזיק אותי שלא אפול. בין הטיפות ואין גבולות, לבן בהיר קשה לראות, פציעה קטנה בעולמי, הכל כל כך כמעט שקוף, הכל כל כך כמעט חשוף, רוצה לדרוך כאן עם כל אהבה, ועכשיו כמו מאב אלוקים ייתן בי כוח להמשיך כמו כולם את הקושי לנצח, אם בשביל זה אני קיים בעולם, ובא כמה פסיעות משל כולם ונחלים יהיו לים ללב גדול פתוח לשיר חדש ועכשיו כמו מאב אלוקים ייתן לי כוח להמשיך כמו כולם את הקושי לנצח בשביל זה אני קיים בעולם אבי הרי לי את הדרך בשבילי ולי אל הדרך שיר קטן בלב ומתוכי תפילה אחת יוצא תן לי את הרגש הזה כולם את הקושי לנצח בשביל זה אני קיים בעולם אבי הרי לי את הדרך בשבילי אלוקים ייתן בי כוח להמשיך כמו כולם את הקושי לנצח ים בעולם אבי הרי לי את הדרך בשבילי הרי לי את הדרך בשבילי שקיעה יפה של שמש מאירה כשהעולם עטוף שתיקה מזמין את הדממה מביא איתו את החלום וללב שלי תקווה ולי נותר רק לחכות להגשמה זה הזמן שלי לברוח אל עולם של ילדים זה הזמן שלי לעוף איתם בלי לחפש מילים הרצון שלי לחבור כאן עולם מלא צבעים יהיה בו די ישיב אליי את החיים היו בי עוד אורות בשלל גוונים והם קבעו פניי היום נותרו רק כוכבים כי בלילות ליבי נפתח לחיות את החלום וילד אז בי נכנס אומר שלום זה הזמן שלי צבעים, יהיה בו די ישיב אליי את החיים. עולם של ילדים, זה הזמן שלי לעוף איתם, לחפש מילים. הרצון שלי לחבור כאן עולם מלא צבעים, יהיה בו די ישיב אליי. אזכור את הדרך שהייתה בי נחרטת, וטלית נעטפו הימים, ואת הגיטרה שהייתה בי פורטת על חולות הזהב החמים. בשביל לבית הכנסת רוח ערב פורסת בצעיף השקיעה אבודה. עם ערב נכנסת אותה שעה של חסד ותפילה אחת בודדה, אשיר לכם שירים לבית אבי, אשיר לכם על גביע יין, הלב בין מלך ונביא, והלב זוכר כל שיר עדיין, אשיר לכם שירים לבית אבי, אשיר לכם על גביע יין, הלב בין מלך ונביא, והלב זוכר כל שיר עדיין. לא אשכח לילות הזוהר, ים של תכלת ועודן, חלום שהלך ולא חזר, את אותו העולם שהיה כאן מקודם והיום לא יבין אותו לבזר. משביל לבית הכנסת רוח ערב פורסת את צעיף השקיעה אבודה. עם ערב נכנסת אותה שעה של חסד ותפילה אחת בודדה, אשיר לכם שירים לבית אבי, אשיר לכם על גביע יין, הלב בין מלך ונביא, והלב זוכר כל שיר עדיין, אשיר לכם שירים לבית בגבעתיים. נקטפו כבר כל השדות הפורחים, כנראה שכבו הנרות ונותרנו לבד בחושך לטעות. כנראה זהו סוף הימים, כבר התחלנו לראות סימנים, הגלים מנסים לטפס, להגיע ממך לבקש. כנראה זהו סוף הימים, כבר התחלנו לראות סימנים, לא נוכל ויהיה לנו קל להגיע למעלה מעל לכל. השמש תזרח כשניצן של תקווה בליבנו יפרח. כנראה שהשחר עולה, מביט בשתיקה לנו לא מגלה. כנראה שהגענו לסוף, אין מה לשנות, אין צורך לדחוף. אז כנראה זהו סוף הימים, כבר התחלנו לראות סימנים, הגלים מנסים לטפס, להגיע ממך לבקש. כנראה זהו סוף הימים, כבר התחלנו לראות סימנים, לא נוכל ויהיה לנו כאן להגיע למעלה מעל לכל. התחלנו לראות סימנים, לא נוכל ויהיה לנו קל להגיע למעלה מעל לכל גל. עטפה בחום את נשמתי. לך ודרכך תצלח, אתה כבר יודע ללכת, תגיע לבד למקום האמיתי. יממה ברכתי לך, בנית את עולמי, לי שנתת אותי אהבת בכל צורה שהיא. יממה ברכתי לך, בנית את עולמי. את דאגותיי רק היא הבינה, ושמרה תמיד על מקומי. זאת אותה איתה תיקח ידיי, תמיד קצת מעבר למה שבחרתי לבוא ולגלות. יממה ברכתי לך, בנית את עולמי, לי שם נתת אותי אהבת בכל צורה שהיא. יממה ברכתי לך, בנית את עולמי. עכשיו אני מודה לך, רחוק אבל שייך לך, שאושר רק תדעי. יממה, מאמה שלי. שבחרתי לבוא ולגלות. יממה ברכתי לך, בנית את עולמי, לי שם נתת אותי אהבת בכל צורה שהיא. יממה בנית את עולמי. אם אשכח דמותך אשכח את ימיני, ירושלים את מסעת כל לבני, ולזכרך בראש כל שמחתי, וביום אבלך אפר על ראשי. אני נשבע אשכח דותך, אשכח את ימיני. ירושלים את מסעת כל לבני, ולזכרך בראש כל שמחתי, וביום בברך אפרה ראשי.
It's time to come out of the Matrix.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great and Oz has spoken.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland.
Welcome, everyone, to Beyond the Matrix, Jewish Answers for Life and Faith. I'm your host, Ira Michelson, along with my co-host,
Rod Bryant.
If you're listening right now, it's because you made the decision to unplug and join the real world.
Look, you're not going to find anyone controlling things from behind the curtain here. No need to click your heels 3 times. Just make the choice between the blissful ignorance of illusion or embrace the sometimes painful truth of reality.
We have an exciting show for you today, so get strapped in as we go beyond the Matrix. Welcome, everyone, to Beyond the Matrix. Well, if you haven't already figured it out today, that is a pre-recorded introduction. And unfortunately, my co-pilot today is not feeling very well. Rod is under the weather, so I just pray refuah shlema achi. I hope you're listening. And I just ask that our listeners pray refuah shlema for Rod, as he's not feeling well. It's going to be an interesting show today. Why? Because I, myself, just got off a cruise ship this morning at about 10 a.m. And by the time we got all our bags and got the car loaded and stopped off at the kosher market because we haven't been home for a week and got everything unloaded, pretty much had enough time to get everything unloaded, get into the house, get myself situated, get some music loaded up for everyone, and starting the show. But it's going to be great anyway. It was a very interesting week for me. So we got a lot of people were asking me on Facebook, and then a lot of people on the ship as well were asking, "What do you do for food on a cruise ship as a Torah Jew, an Orthodox Jew?" And I said, well, every cruise ship provides kosher food for you. They provide kosher meals. You have to set it up in advance. And pretty much it's like having airline food. Keep in mind, as a retired chef, I don't go with any preconceived notions about food. When you're cooking food for over 3,000 people on a cruise ship, even if you were eating regular food and not kosher food, it's pretty much banquet food. It may be, nice banquet food, but it's still banquet food. It's the kind of food that we used to produce in the hotel when we were doing banquets, weddings, bar mitzvahs, things like that. And so I don't really go for the food, but boy, it was a comedy of errors this week. We thought it would be just a simple process. They confirmed everything way in advance, but unfortunately, there were some issues the first couple of days. We got on the ship last Sunday and walked up to the buffet, and spoke to one of the head waiters and said, can we see the list, the menu for our kosher meals? And he said, well, let me go check with the chef. And one of the sous chefs came out from the back, and he said, there's nothing we can do. And I go, what does that mean, there's nothing you can do? Well, they're loading the ship now. And I didn't want to say anything, but, there was never a time when we did special diets at any place that I worked that we didn't have food. So in other words, I know for a fact, having talked to one of the supervisors there, that they had 100 people on the ship the week before that were eating kosher, and there's no way that they ate every single kosher meal that was on board. That never happens. It just seems that this person couldn't be bothered. So they ended up not doing anything for us. We had to basically find some fish that we could eat that was kosher. And the only thing that we could find was some lox, some smoked salmon. So that was my lunch, and I don't eat bread, so just a pile of smoked salmon. So I go down to passenger services and complain, and they have a head waiter call me, and he assures me, Mr. Michelson, there'll be no problem tonight when you come to dinner. So we sit down for dinner, and the head waiter comes over and says, we need your order right now because the food is frozen and we need to defrost it. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? This guy couldn't have come with a menu to us or asked me to meet him sometime in the afternoon and get that taken care of. So I said, okay, well, bring me a bottle of water and a cup of coffee. 20 minutes later, no water, no coffee. My food comes. My wife had ordered the roast turkey. Now, I don't know about any of you guys, but where I come from, and as a chef, when somebody orders roast turkey, it's just that. But her meal comes, and it's some kind of breaded cutlet. And she can't eat breading, so I said, okay, how about making us a double-wrapped piece of salmon? So we can, get some fish that's kosher, and, they double-wrap it in foil and cook it for us, and that's acceptable. Well, a half an hour later still. So here we are sitting down to dinner at 8:15. It's 10 o'clock. We still don't have food. So I walked out with no dinner. Our dinner was the cheese that we brought with us and some cashews. And so this just went on and on for days. And they were so embarrassed. We ended up sitting down with the assistant maitre d' the next day, and he assured me everything would be okay, and they forgot our food that night. So he was embarrassed to come back and talk to us. And finally, I sat down with the food and beverage director of the entire ship. And finally, everything was straightened out, and I gave them my own recipes for the fish, and that's what we ate the rest of the cruise. So it's very interesting. The other interesting thing is that we on cruise ships, I was really surprised that I wasn't accosted like I usually am. Typically, there's at least one very zealous Christian that sees you walking around with a kippah that sets their sights on you, and you can usually tell them by the verbiage. But that didn't happen. I was surprised. What really was very surprising, and not shocking, but very surprising to me, was the number of Jewish people on this cruise. I mean, typically coming out of Florida, that there are going to be Jewish people on a cruise, but I mean, just person after person coming over to us and asking us what we're doing for food and so forth. I didn't go, but I understand most cruise ships on Friday night, Erev Shabbos, they will provide a space for you to have a service. And typically it's non-sectarian. You have all types of people, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, every different level of observance, and they'll have like a challah and wine for you. And I didn't go. And typically I hear from people that, people show up. As a matter of fact, one guy saw me on last night after Shabbos, Saturday night, and he said to me, he went because he figured it would be a mitzvah to have, be part of a minyan. He was afraid that they might not have a minyan. Well, it turns out that the place that they set aside wasn't big enough. They had standing room only. They had to bring chairs in. I understand there were over 100 people at the service. Of course, it's, being Orthodox, we have the mechitza, the separation of men and women. And of course, this was a service with everybody sitting together. I also understand there was a rabbi on board on the cruise on vacation, and he did the service. I don't know I don't know if he was Reformed, Conservative, or Orthodox. Anyway, so that was my experience this week. And overall, we had a great time. And here we are back, Beyond the Matrix, Sunday afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And as always, we want to bring you what we consider guests that are on the cutting edge of the subjects that we talk about. We talk about many, many different subjects related to Judaism, giving people answers that they want from a Jewish perspective on the Hebrew Scriptures, and today is no different than any other day. The gentleman that I'm about to bring on is a new friend of mine. As most of you know already, my relationship with Jews for Judaism is the East Coast Outreach Coordinator. And as such, I've met many other people in the counter-missionary community. A mutual friend introduced us, thought that we should get together and speak. And our guest today comes down to Florida and spends some of his time here in Florida, actually lives probably about 10 or 15 minutes away from where I am. And we've gotten a chance to spend some time together over coffee and to talk, and he has written, I think, the book that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about all his books, but the one that we really want to focus on is the new book. But I think this is number 8, his 8th book that he's written so far. And I'm not sure that so many people know about him. Many of you may, but we wanted to introduce you to our guest today to Beyond the Matrix. So I'm going to bring him on now. His name is Gerald Siegel. And Jerry, are you there?
I'm here.
You're there. So Jerry is one of my new BFFs, my new best friends.
And I love it to be your friend.
Oh, well, thank you very much. So Jerry, you and I spoke, several times about the show, and I kind of gave you a little insight about our listeners that really, in the same way, go across the board of the people that I was talking about on the ship today. We have people from every level of observance within Judaism, as well as a large segment of our audience that comes out of Christianity, that have now left Christianity, are now trying to find a home, and many of them are looking for answers, and that's something that we want to give. So why don't you start out by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and a little bit about how you got involved in the counter-missionary community and why you got involved in writing these books.
Well, to say the counter-missionary community, when I started, I think I was the counter-missionary.
You were the community.
We're going back now to I'd say maybe 1955 or so.
Wow.
I had even before that time. In 1955. I was 15 years old, but I came across missionary material in the oddest places. It was like if Hashem was pushing me in this direction, and certainly I've been pushed for some 60 years now. What happened was, as I said, I came across a number of different missionary tracts in odd places, and there was a news in the New York Times. They would advertise their service, and my curiosity got the better of me, and I started to look at this material and seeing that, not that I knew much, but I knew enough to know that they're making mistakes in what they say. So the more I looked at the material and the more I studied it, the more I was shocked by what I saw there. And then my brother was at college, and one of his courses was a literature course where they had to have a King James Bible. So I was able to see the New Testament at that point, and to check out a lot of the statements that they made in the pamphlets, comparing the what they call the Old Testament with the Hebrew, and it just didn't go together. And then, of course, I discovered I was reading a Jewish history book, and I discovered Faith Strengthened by Isaac Troche, which was a book written in the 1500s refuting Christianity. And I went to the 42nd Street Library, get out the book, which was crumbling at the time, written about it was translated and printed about 1865 or so. So I studied the book, made copies. I wrote it by hand in those days, and that's how I got started in it, and kept researching for a number of years before I began writing, and writing articles for myself, basically at the beginning, and eventually I started thinking about a book, and then organizations started popping up in the 1960s when the missionaries started getting very active. So here we are today as a result of that.
So 15 years old is when you first got involved.
Yeah, that's when I first started actually doing material.
So what was your first experience with like one-on-one with a missionary? When did that happen, where you actually had somebody confront you or you confronted?
Actually, I would say about 1960.
Okay.
So that would be when I was about 20 years old. Was probably the first time, except for the occasional Jehovah's Witness at the door that nobody talks to. So, but as far as a missionary who was directing all their efforts towards converting Jews, I would say when I was about 20 years old.
And how did that go? I'm curious.
Very strange, because the woman who I encountered was telling me about the virgin birth and apologizing for using the words. And it was 1960 rather than now when everything goes. And she just didn't make any sense trying to explain how the virgin birth came about. So, that was just adding fuel to the fire of how silly some of the things that they have to say are. But, of course, not everyone sees the silliness in it. And then, of course, I guess the next thing would be somebody with Isaiah 53, the old standard. So these things only strengthen my feeling that somebody should be doing something. And in those days, there wasn't anybody, so I decided I would do it.
So basically, some things never changed. They didn't make sense in 1960, and they still don't make sense with their arguments today. And that's really, Jerry, the reason for that is because Hebrew has never changed over the years. In thousands.
Not only that Hebrew hasn't changed, but even nowadays, when you hear sometimes that they'll use the Hebrew and they'll quote the Hebrew, they'll quote the Hebrew Bible, and then they'll start talking to you about what it means, and to revert to the incorrect format that they've always used, as we'll see with the 70 weeks of Daniel.
Right.
They might be speaking about what the Ein Lo means, but then, and they'll quote the Hebrew, and they'll translate it even the way, for instance, the old JPS translated it, and then they'll start talking about that it means that Jesus died for other people's sins. So it doesn't really matter what the Hebrew says. They'll just keep on going with their old line.
Sure. So I know you don't like this, that I'm going to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I think we talked about this. You do, I know you don't like the term rabbi, but you do have smicha, don't you, Jerry?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? I thought you did. I thought we talked about that. Maybe it was somebody else. Okay,
Must
I
be
thought
somebody else. No, I don't have smicha, and I don't like to take a title I don't have. So.
Oh, okay. So maybe that's what we talked about. Maybe we talked about the phonies. And I used to be in that class, so. But anyway, so let's talk about when you first started writing. So I think I was correct in saying that somebody asked what the title of the book is. The new book is called The 70 Weeks of Daniel and covers, of course, Daniel 9:24 to 27. But if I'm correct, this is your 8th book, correct?
Yes, it is.
So let's see. We have, I'm looking here, if they're in chronological order, we have the Jew and the Christian missionary, a Jewish response to missionary Christianity. We have anti-Judaism in the New Testament, Trinity doctrine error, a Jewish analysis, Isaiah 53, who is the servant, the blood atonement deception, how Christianity distorted biblical atonement, the resurrection fantasy, reinventing Jesus, and the virgin birth myth, the misconception of Jesus. And now, of course, the 8th book, the 70 Weeks of Daniel. So when did you start writing?
Oh, I started writing, well, pretty much after I started it, when I was 15, not writing a book, but just gathering information. And I would say that starting to write with the intention of possibly writing a book was about, I'd say about 1965 or so, 1965, in that time period.
Oh, well, good. You'll be happy. You'll be happy to know that one of our listeners just posted in the chat room that she actually has anti-Judaism in the New Testament.
Okay.
So you are known by some of our listeners.
Yeah, I'm planning on revising that book, so to republish it.
So that's an interesting topic. Why don't you tell the rest of our listeners what the concept is, or the format of that book, Anti-Judaism in the New Testament?
What I did there was I went through the various supposed proof texts that the missionaries use in claiming that Jesus is the Messiah. And what I did was I broke them down into each one, answering each one, some of them quite a number of pages, some of them in one page. And I just went first through the Tanakh, starting in Bereshit and Genesis, and going through, and then I counted the New Testament for the second part of the book, so that it's pretty much an overall view. And then in the other books, I went into detail on some of the major topics, like as you read, the Isaiah 53, blood atonement, and there's so much to say within each one, so that whereas you might have a chapter of 10 pages in the first book, it might be 200 and some odd pages in a book by itself.
Sure.
So that's how I spent my time over the years, and just that it's in a way upsetting to do this, in that, and I might be offending somebody out in the audience, but you might say it's a fraud what you see the perpetuating of things that are just not true. It's like if the Christian theology has not only distorted, but they have a different Bible than the Jewish Bible. Because of the way they translate. It's not even to say, well, they use a Septuagint here or there or something. They have distorted it in such a way that the people out there who believe it, sincere people, Christians, I've met many Christians and discussed these things with them. And they're sincere people. They're people who want to communicate and have a contact with God, a personal contact. And unfortunately, what they have is not true. And the 70 weeks, or Isaiah 53, or Psalm 2, these things are just it's sad to see what happens, that people who want to know God and want to be close, and yet what happens is they get waylaid by what are lies.
Sure. And you never have to worry about offending anybody on this show, because I do that for everybody every week. We are a no holds barred kind of radio show, Jerry. So you don't have to hold back. And it is true. When you brought up the Jehovah's Witnesses earlier, I have to laugh, because the last time anybody ever showed up at my house, I was so frustrated. I was in a hurry, and I opened up the door, and I saw the Jehovah's Witness there with his son, and I said, I just have a simple question for you. I said, can you read Hebrew? He said, no. I said, can you understand biblical Hebrew? He said, no. I said, all right, well, go learn Hebrew and then come back and we'll have a conversation. Because it is really true. Not only do they quote, but the mistranslation thing is a big issue. You brought that up. So let's get down to it. Let's get down to the new book, The 70 Weeks of Daniel. One of the things that we've talked about on this show in the past with both Rod and myself and with other guests is the whole concept of Mashiach. And you start to deal with this subject very early on in the book, speaking of mistranslation, as it relates to the phrase Mashiach Nagid. That we see in verse 25, I believe, of Daniel chapter 9?
Yes.
All right. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, about this issue of Mashiach, and there's so many times that we see that term used, but yet not only a mistranslation, but a misuse of the word in the Hebrew Scriptures.
Well, let me use the King James Version as a comparison, since it is so widely used, even though nowadays people often use others, but when you go back and you look at where they get their information, it's often a bit off from the King James. There are only the translation of the word Mashiach in the King James, for instance. Every other place except two places, which are in Daniel, they translate as anointed. It's only in this particular chapter that you find that they use the Messiah, the Prince, and so on. And what happens is they mistranslate when they say, I don't have it right in front of me, when they say the Messiah, the Prince, rather than an anointed one.
Right, Mashiach Nagid, yeah.
Yeah, the Mashiach Nagid, they instead of saying an anointed prince, they say the anointed prince,
right,
to give it a definite personage that they're referring to. So, right away you're starting off with a mental image that people reading it will get, that it's the Messiah. They capitalize the word Messiah, and when you have something like that, being honest. And when you're not translating it the way you translate in the rest of your volume. So this is right away sets the tone of what's happening and what I'm saying when I say, as I have a chapter heading in this book, Bias for Jesus. The whole concept of translation and the way things are translated, it's not a question just of saying, well, it could be translated this way or it can be translated that way. There is context in which to interpret things, and what happens here is that they mistranslate so that it will seem that it's Messiah the Prince should be capitalized, and it refers to a certain person, and of course a certain person that they have in mind is Jesus. I might add that in dividing up what's called in Hebrew snafta, one of the it's like a semicolon.
Mm-hmm.
In the original King James version, they had it the way they have it in the Hebrew, which shows that there are two different anointed ones that are referred to. Then about 1798 or so, somebody realized that, hey, they were agreeing with the Jews on this, and it didn't look good for the Christian interpretation. So the King James was changed to make it into a comma, right? or not even a comma. I don't recall what's in there. But it's certainly not the semicolon, which divides up the sentence the proper way.
Right.
So this is the thing that you get with how you translate anointed one rather than Messiah, because Messiah has a certain thought to it that people right away think of whoever the Messiah is that they are hoping will come, be it Jewish or Christian.
Right, and sometimes you even see a translation in English of the Messiah.
Right. Well, they translate. It doesn't say there the Messiah. In fact, in verse 26, which verifies the truth of the Jewish interpretation of verse 25, when it says the 62 weeks, which makes it the definite 62. There they leave out the definite article before the translation into 62. Whereas when it comes to Mashiach Nagid, they put in a definite article. So
right.
You know that when they translate like this, you know that they understand the importance of the definite article in a certain place, and by putting it in where it doesn't belong, but enhances what they want to say, and leaving it out where it would be detrimental to what they say, you know that they are consciously being liars for Jesus.
Sure, because if we look at those two verses, as we already discussed, Mashiach Nagid, anointed ruler or anointed leader or anointed prince, it could be translated one of those three ways. And then in verse 26, it just says, Mashiach, the anointed, anointed. So this is where this, what we're discussing of the idea that in these three verses, we're talking about two different anointed ones. And we're certainly not talking about two different anointed ones, or an anointed one that comes once and then comes back a second time.
No.
So
the text to say that.
Yeah. This really goes to something else that you discuss in one of the chapters of the book, which is the concept of even identifying messianic prophecies. And this becomes an issue all the time. And in my discussions with Christians, I always find it very funny that they don't recognize the fact that there are no way of knowing a specific messianic prophecy outside of Torah Judaism, because it's our Chazal, it's our sages who developed the idea that something was a messianic prophecy. And yet it's these same sages, these same, sages of Judaism that out of hand rejected the notion that Jesus was the Messiah.
Well, this is one of the ironic things that you find in discussing with Christians. In fact, I was just looking at something how they use the Zohar in that way, where they claim that it talks about the Trinity and about Jesus and so on. So it's whatever they can use, no matter how they distort it. Christian theology has had no bounds in what they will do in order to get their viewpoint across, and it's what Paul said: whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in this I rejoice. And they take that to heart. And no matter how they say it doesn't mean that, when push comes to shove, that's what they do. And as I said before, the tragedy is that so many sincere people who feel themselves to be Christians have been deluded by this liars for Jesus type of attitude, where anything goes in order to proclaim that Jesus is the Messiah. So in that respect, it's these people are just, taken for a ride.
I mean, I studied math in school, as I'm sure you did, but it almost seems like they've come up with a new mathematical system when you talk about Daniel chapter 9 and the verses that we're looking at, because they come up with some really creative ways of trying to date the beginning of these 70 weeks in order to make it fit Jesus.
Yeah, I think for everybody. They had there are so many. When I was writing, I said, I couldn't answer every one of them. Not that they couldn't be answered, but there were so many of them, and they would, this one says it's when Jesus started his ministry. Others say it was when he was born. Others say, the major one that you have is that the crucifixion. And if the dates don't show that, because they try to go backwards, and and they do it through the day. You have the Anderson and his who about 100 years ago or so, no more than 150 years ago, wrote a book, the Coming Prince, and he got it down to the hour of Jesus coming. But there were a few little changes that he made. He presumed certain dates as if that's and then it becomes, his presumptions become hard facts about when it started, what day it started, and then after he's done it, and years later, people realize he didn't. He included a 0 year between BCE and CE, which throws him off by a year. So along comes somebody else by the name of Harold Honer and corrects that and changes the dates also to try to rectify this type of thing. And he's also wrong. But the problem is that they will keep on making these little changes and so on, and others will come along, other Christians, and will correct them and so on. And the truth of the matter is, none of them are true. And now they might be sincere in what they're doing. I don't know. I can't answer for them. But the truth of the matter is that it comes out that it's simply incorrect. Right. And if you just take the dates and you subtract the dates that starting in 586, the way it should be, you find that it just doesn't come out to Jesus.
Right. So with that, is there a way, because we certainly want, because there's so much information. I mean, if you're listening right now, there's so much information packed into this book. I started reading it while I was on the cruise. I'm continuing to read it, and it really has to, be read slowly so that you can, I'm probably going to have to read it 2 or 3 times to really absorb everything in it, which I like to do with any book. But maybe what you can do is give us kind of a nutshell version of these 3 verses from the Jewish perspective.
Okay. From the Jewish perspective, again, as you say, it's not easy to say it, while standing on one foot. However, what it says is that there is, starting with Daniel asking the question in the first place. He says, when is the exile going to end? When are we returning to Eretz Yisrael? And God answers him through the angel Gabriel, and he's told that they're going back, but he says, I got a better message for you, like even a more important message. And then Gabriel tells him about what's going to happen over a period of 70 weeks. And it's weeks of years, so it comes out to 490 years. And there are certain things that are told that will happen during this time. And built into it is the awareness that while things will be much better than they were during the First Temple period, it talks about how Pesha will end. What is the Pesha? It's the sin of idolatry, and you'll have more adherence to the Torah during this period, rather than what happened in the first period. The threat of idolatry will be much less, and even though there'll be problems coming up from outside sources, like the Maccabees had to deal with, there'll be troublesome times. It speaks about. Nevertheless, what happens is that during this period, the religious aspects of life will be strengthened, and that people will have more adherence to Torah than ever before. And this will lead up to the 70th week. 70, and I might say, break down the weeks for a moment. You start 586, and then it talks about 7 weeks. 7 weeks, that means 49 years. And who comes after 49 years? Cyrus, the Persian king, who allows the Jews to return to Eretz Yisrael. Then you have the 62 weeks, which is a period of 434 years, 7 times 62. And this gets you down to the year 103 BCE. And just to tell you something about who is the second Messiah that's or anointed one that's mentioned in the text. I said 103. It's interesting. That's when, but I had no idea who this anointed one could be. And then I'm reading Josephus a number of years later. Because I had put this aside. I had other things that I was doing, and sometimes I would write some of this down, and then I would go on to something else. I'm reading Josephus, the Loeb edition, and if anybody's familiar with the Loeb edition, they give sometimes in the margin they'll give you information like the year something happened, and in 103 it says that Alexander Yanai, who was the Hasmonean high priest and king, comes to power. He becomes the king at that time. So I said 103, and then I'm thinking. It says in the text in verse 26, and after the 62 weeks. And I said to myself, wait a minute. It's not saying right after. It's saying after. It doesn't tell you exactly when. It just says after that period. So I realized that Alexander Yanai was the second anointed one who is mentioned. And interestingly enough, what happens to the second anointed one? He's cut off. If anybody in the audience knows what kares is, it's not just being cut off. It's where in Jewish law, somebody who has done something which is really off the charts, he loses everything, not just in life but in death. It's punishment after death. And Alexander Yanai was not what you would think of for a high priest and a king in Judaism. He murdered the Pharisees. He crucified them. He murdered their children in front of them. And a number of other stories that you can find in the Talmud about him. So he was somebody who deserved to have nothing after death. And what does it say about this second anointed one? It says, "Ve'ein lo, he shall have nothing. He shall be cut off." And this is one of those sticky points with Christianity, where the King James and many other translations will say, instead of "ve'ein lo," meaning he shall have nothing or be cut off, it says that but not for himself, that he'll die but not for himself, which is a complete distortion and not only misrepresenting what's in the text, but gives a false sense of hope to people who read this and who believe that Jesus is the Messiah. So he was cut off at this point, and then so that's the 70. That's the 62 weeks, and then it jumps again. The 70th week. It's not that one comes right after the other. The 70th week deals with the last 7 years of the temple and what happened with the Romans, and it's amazing when one studies this and sees what happened when you read Josephus and you see what happened in that period of time, how everything came together. For those people who say that doesn't refer to that period and it was written by somebody referring to an earlier high priest, it shows you that this is true prophecy. And then at the end of the 62 weeks, after the last week, there's a little addendum at the end which talks about what's going to be happening to the Temple Mount, the Har HaBayis. And it talks about, and again, it's amazing, because it talks about the winged, the wing of the, I haven't got the text in front of me, or if I can find the text, and upon the wing of abomination shall be that which causes desolation, and that until decisive destruction shall be poured out upon that which causes desolation. What that means is the wing of abominations means quite often a high place is called a wing in Tanakh, and this talks about the Temple Mount and what happens on the Temple Mount afterwards, after its destruction. It talks about, if you look at history, the Romans put up a temple to Jupiter, whose signature is an eagle with wings. The Roman standards had wings on them. The Arab conqueror Saladin had on his flag a wing. So always you have this over and over again about wings having to do with the Temple Mount. And what it says is that there'll be a time when the desolations that are on the Temple Mount will be destroyed. They'll be wiped away. So all alien houses of worship that have ever been on the Temple Mount will be eventually done away with, including, of course, what's up there at the present time. So it tells you not only what's going to happen in the 70 weeks, the 490 years, but it also tells you that what's going to happen in the future, that the third temple will be built, and that we will once again have the Beis Hamikdash.
It's so interesting in discussing this. Thank you so much for going into detail on that. Of course, it makes sense to me. But here we come with this whole concept. This is another thing that I get into discussion with, or argument with Christians all the time. When we're talking about the Beis Hamikdash and the third temple, certainly something that has to come, which will be a real sign of the Hamashiach, the Messiah, that we're waiting for in Judaism. And this flies in the face of what the Christians, and I think you have a chapter on this as well, on the Christians' insistence that the Messiah had to come before the destruction of the second temple. And yet we see this all through Yehezkel and Ezekiel 45 on, that talks about the reconstruction of the Beis Hamikdash, of the third temple, and the fact that there will be a reinstitution of sacrifices, including chatat, including the sin sacrifice. So I always ask them, how in the world, if your Yashka, your Jesus, is the final sacrifice for sin, why would Hashem allow for a temple to be rebuilt and the reinstitution of sin sacrifice?
Well, just to mention something along those lines, the Christian insistence that Jesus shed his blood on the cross for humanity's sins, the question that should be asked is, where did he shed his blood? If you read what all of the Gospels have to say, nowhere does it say that he shed his blood on the cross. You can say that he was bleeding, but you can't say that he died from his wound, from actual blood loss. If you read carefully, you see that he did not die from blood loss, and that's what happened to a sacrificial animal. It wasn't that you just beat him up or you cut him a little bit. He had to die as a result of blood loss. So maybe Jesus died of shock, but he did not die as a result of actual loss of blood. And one could read every one of those Gospels. And of course, if it was so, they certainly would have put it in. And that they left it out. It's what I like to say, that the New Testament was divinely inspired. And people are shocked when I say that. And I say, yes, God made sure that there'll be enough mistakes in it that people, if they look carefully, will be able to see it. So in that respect, the New Testament is divinely inspired.
Yeah, of course, especially in discussing this topic today. The Gospels, I believe, don't even agree in what we talk about the dating. When you look at typically what the Christian will point you towards, Matthew 24, or whatever they point you to as it relates to the abomination of desolation that's spoken of in Daniel 9, they don't even all agree. The Gospels.
Well, nowhere, excuse me, this pinpointing of the 490 years to be exactly having to do with Jesus. How interesting is it that when you have, for instance, in Acts, Peter is in the streets of Jerusalem talking about salvation and Jesus is the Messiah and everything, that he never says, people, get out your quill, get out your parchment, and crunch the numbers. Look at it, how it works out exactly to Jesus. Nowhere does it say that. This is an idea that came 200-300 years later of trying to fit the 490 years into the time of Jesus. It just doesn't work out. And even the first apostles, according to their own writings, didn't use it as a weapon. You see where they'll have, for instance, Philip and the eunuch, and you talk about the Isaiah 53. So we know that they used Isaiah 53 to try to flesh out the story of Jesus. That's the topic for another day.
Right.
But they didn't even mention it. There's no mention. Peter, Paul, nobody mentions the 70 weeks as referring to Jesus, and they should have been doing it, because one of the things that you hear from missionaries is that the people at that time, the Jewish people, were expecting the Messiah to come at any moment. Then, so why didn't they use that to say, "Hey, look at this, 490 years, and it works out exactly to the day of his crucifixion"? They didn't do it because they couldn't do it, because they would have been shown up right away that it was incorrect.
Absolutely. So, Jerry, we just have a couple of minutes left. People have been asking in the chat here whether or not you have a website, and I don't know if you do.
No, I can give my email address if anybody.
Right. So give us some contact information of people. Two things. One, if people want to contact you, they're interested in the 70 Weeks of Daniel or any of your other books, how would they get into contact with you about that?
Well, they can. Amazon has my books. I'll give you the spelling of my name, Gerald with a G, and Sigal, which is not the usual spelling that you see. That's, again, Sigal. Mm-hmm. So you can see on Amazon. The publisher is Ex Libris. I can give you the telephone number. It's 1-888-795-4274, or one can order online by going to orders at Ex Libris. That's XLIBRIS.com. Orders at xlibris.com. Or even going into Barnes and Nobles, they can order the book. That's basically where they can get the book. Any one of those places. And if there are any questions, they can get me at my email address, which is my name spelled backwards, Lagis rather than Sigal, at AOL.com.
You know, I never realized that. I was trying to figure out the past couple of days, laying there out in the sun, trying to figure out where you got Lagis, and it never dawned on me that it was your name backwards.
Doing things backwards.
No, definitely. You're definitely not backwards, Jerry, when it comes to understanding the context of the Hebrew Scriptures and being able to, elucidate that in your books and, in the show. I really appreciate your coming on today.
If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to put some input into it. As I said, that's where they can reach me. And I guess if somebody gets in contact with you and wants to get my address, you can get that also.
Absolutely. So thank you again so much, Jerry, for being on with us today.
Thank you, my new friend.
Yeah, let's have coffee sometime this week now that I'm back.
Absolutely.
Okay, my friend.
Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
So thank you, everybody, for being on. Let me just remind you before we close out the show about the Let's Get Biblical tour coming up in October with the three amigos, myself, Rod Bryant, and Rabbi Tovia Singer. You can go to www.israeltours.com/getbiblical.html, and you'll be able to look at the itinerary, some of the great places we're going to, places that you don't typically see on any tour. On top of that, you're going to have the benefit of teaching from myself, from Rod, and from Rabbi Singer, really pinpointed teaching in the different spots that we'll be going to, uncovering the Hebrew Scriptures, the Tanakh, for you in a way that you probably, certainly, have never seen, and especially standing in those spots in God's Holy Land. So we encourage you to consider saving your shekels and coming with us. I ask you to continue to pray a refuah shlema for Rod, my achi, my brother, that he would get well soon and he would return to us next week as we go beyond the matrix. So thank you, everybody. Shavua Tov. Have a great week. And we will see you next week on Beyond the Matrix.